Okay, should be good to go. We should be live. And let's see. There we go. Spectacular. Hello, everybody, and welcome, welcome, welcome. Welcome back. Whoop, there's my microphone. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode, another live report for you guys today for the Firebrand report. So it's good to see you guys. I am happy so many folks coming out to join me to get a breakdown on what's going on geopolitically around the world, give you guys access to that open source reporting, that high quality reporting, those sources that the professionals use, that the people who really report the news. I want to make sure that you guys are getting that quality of information instead of this, trend we're seeing in mainstream media and even other independent creators on platforms like Substack, where I host this show, among other places. It's really time to make sure that we're getting you guys as a journalist, as a analyst, as someone who watches what's going on. I think it's super important that we give you guys the information that the news is going to be drawing from to make these reportings, especially coming out of the United States, where I live, where the media is just so bought, paid for, and meant to enrage and keep people upset. It serves a different purpose. So you've been here a while. You've probably noticed that we've done a bit of a rebrand. We're coming at things from a new direction, and that direction is still very in line with the motivations and the reasons I started the Firebrand project. But more importantly, it's in line with where we need to be now as Firebrands. And that is reshaping the reporting and the space and demonstrating that real journalism is about giving all of the information. That real exceptional reporting is using open source information that is there in abundance and getting that to you with analysis. No more opinions. No more, I know I'm never going to claim that I have the answers. I will give you my analysis. I'll give you my thoughts, but this new angle we're going at is something that I'm happy to say that I think this is a good direction for us to go. And it seems that other people are seeing that as well. If you're just now getting here from wherever you're coming, make sure you hit the like button, hit that heart, tap it a couple times. If you haven't, why not? So go ahead and do that for sure. If you're watching the recording, same deal. Hit the heart, hit the restack button, and leave a comment that says, oops, I didn't like it yet. Or, yes, I liked it. We want to get that engagement up. It really helps with everything as well. You can always scan this QR code here as well. It'll take you to a link tree, which I've built, which will take you to our other socials, where as the Firebrand project in our new relaunch here, we're going to be providing geopolitics in different ways on different platforms. So this is something I'm really excited to announce. Particularly the TikTok is something we're going to be building out first as well. We've got a really solid base there. So if you haven't already gone to the link tree, if you see you're on any of those platforms, make sure you give us a follow, because we're just getting started there. The Middle East right now, which we're doing Middle East Spotlight today. If you read the title, and if not, we're going to do the Middle East Spotlight. So, what is the Middle East Spotlight? And I think that is a interesting, it's one of those regions of the world where right now it's a flashpoint. But the interesting thing about the Middle East to me is that it's also kind of like this part of the world where you had the fusion, right? You have the Horn of Africa. So you have Africa coming up into the Mediterranean, right? You have the Gulf of Aden. You have this key shipping lane in the Red Sea. North Africa, the Sahel region, right? That's just as unstable as the Middle East. It's hard not to kind of lump them into the same thing, because what happens in the Sahel does affect, these Gulf states. But at the same time, in terms of separation, it's easier to block the news by region. So when I do give you this information, you get a better regional picture. So if you haven't watched the spotlight on Africa, if you don't watch the Africa spotlight, which we do on Mondays, the first day of the week, then you should go do that, because everything that's happening in Africa, particularly in the Sahel region, does have direct impacts on these Middle Eastern countries. And the whole region itself is a pressure cooker right now. And the question for me is not when, or not if, but when you see a massive regional conflict that could span the entire Sahel up through the Middle East. And there's going to be that's going to have massive ramifications in a huge way. So that's really important. We continue to cover this region, not even just because of the situation around Iran, because of the wider global impact of a larger scale escalating conflict in this region of the world, where you have so many resources that are sourced for Western advanced economies from these poor, underdeveloped African and Middle Eastern nations. And that is why we really need to keep an eye on this region, because it will affect the whole world if we reach a point where Middle East and Northern African stability is no longer functionally maintainable. And that changes and affects our global supply chain in a big way, at a time when the intervention in Africa and the Middle East is much harder than, it's not what it used to be. Insurgencies have evolved like everything else. And these independent proxy networks, like the ones Iran has in Hezbollah or the Houthis, they are absolutely going to have huge impacts in general on the region, because you're seeing a world where governments are fighting these asymmetric wars. And so, it's not always something they can win. And the assumption that because a central government has the money and the power, that they'll eventually stamp out an insurrection or a, religious caliphate or a terrorist group, is really not the case anymore. And you can't count on that. So that's a huge destabilizer as well. So if you're just now getting here, make sure you hit the heart button. We're going to go ahead and jump into the news. We got a lot to cover today. As always, I'm going to give you guys the TLDR. I'm going to get you guys the newsletter and everything that you need to know. And then I'll give you guys that analysis, that insight that I offer that makes this show unique and not just any other newsletter, any other live stream. So without further ado, my friends, let's go ahead and get into the news. My friends, it is February 25th, 2026. I'm reporting to you from formerly the United States of America. And this is the Firebrand Report, Middle Eastern Spotlight. So the Middle East, we're tracking, at least from my perspective, I think let's track it from a perspective of 3 tracks. Okay. So there's the nuclear table in Geneva. You have the escalation ladder from Washington, and the states and regional powers and non-state actors that are all hedging their bets on what the impact is going to look like. The real leverage we're tracking in the region, is U.S. aircraft carriers are going to be one of the central power projections. The concentration of two, potentially three U.S. aircraft carriers in the region is huge. Many countries don't even have two aircraft carriers. In fact, it's only the United States and China, I believe, that have more than two. The UK has two, but one is always broken. So they only have one functional aircraft carrier. But this is a ton of power. I mean, between those two aircraft carriers alone, the ones we've confirmed, the USS Gerald R. Ford and the USS Abraham Lincoln, you're looking at well over 120 plus aircraft. Whether or not it's a good decision for the United States to bring its most advanced and newest aircraft carrier to the Middle East, to the Red Sea, to Red Sea, the Gulf of Aden, not that's up for debate, but they're there. We're talking about tremendous power projection and resource availability in terms of immediately they're shifting tremendous amounts of resources there. You have the IRGC conducting operations and regional governments really deciding how they're going to react. So, we had troops yesterday. You have European nations pulling out troops from Iran and Iraq and bases in the region. Tehran has been very clear. If the U.S. attacks, then Iran was going to retaliate. Iran can't beat the United States, but they could really bloody the U.S. And I'm not the only analyst who's coming to this conclusion here that this might not be a great decision for the United States. Of course, we're still within the 10 to 15 day decision window that was arbitrarily set by the president of the United States. Whether or not that window is an actual timeline, whether it is a bid for time, whether they're still waiting for things to get to the region, that's not really sure. That's not really something we can really be certain of. It could be tomorrow if they decide to attack, right? So we'll see. Turkey, the United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, they're all pressuring the United States to go the diplomatic route. And they have announced again that in Geneva, talks will resume tomorrow between Jared Kushner, Steve Witkoff, and Iranian diplomats. It's interesting because I'll say that both of those guys are so pro-Israel, which is regionally incredibly unpopular. Things were improving, and then Israel decided to strike in Qatar, and this was back last year, where they actually struck a diplomatic meeting between Hamas officials and the Hamas officials and Qatari mediators. The takeaway in terms of what can be done to the United States fleet, I don't know who. I know I've heard of Malcolm Nance, but I would say that if his analysis was that the United States fleet could be overwhelmed by the sheer volume of drones, the most likely strategy that we will see from Iran is the following, in my opinion. You're going to see large waves of Shahed drones. They are going to be launched in batches of several hundred. Those batches of several hundred will come before. They will they'll be intended to suck up U.S. interceptor capacity. And after that, you'll start to see more and more waves of missiles. But the struggle the United States is going to find out very quickly is that no amount of defenses are an answer for the level of saturation of Shahed drones, even the Sea Whiz guns on these destroyers, and where they're shooting tens of thousands of bullets per second. That's going to be overwhelmed. Drone warfare is just not going to happen. They don't even have the stockpiles. And guess what? If they're smart, which they know what they're doing in Iran, you have to think they haven't they been preparing for this for like decades? Like, they knew this was going to happen. From their perspective, this was inevitable. But what this circumstance is like the perfect scenario for them. The other issue here is the lack of ground forces. The ability for them to really control or deal with the IRGC in a reasonable capacity is going to be highly limited by the lack of ground forces. If they have some sort of anti-air capacity that the United States isn't prepared for, and one of the things we'll talk about in this newsletter today is, in fact, that capacity potentially being filled by MANPAD, the shoulder-fired anti-aircraft missiles. There's a lot of factors here, and the primary factor, it appears from the United States government's perspective, is that they are just going to win because they're stronger. And the reality is that the U.S. has never fought a war like this. And I'm skeptical that, a cluster, a single carrier group is even capable of stopping a wave of 300 Shahed drones. In fact, I don't even believe that that's possible. This is just very naive. And you could even go one step farther. They've brought in hundreds of aircraft, but what do you think happens when the airspace is full of drones and you're trying to fly hundreds of aircrafts on various different intercept vectors at different altitudes at different times? You're trying to coordinate landing and takeoff from multiple carriers. They're very limited by the bases they can use in the region. If you don't think they're like, what's to stop them from piloting Shahed drones into fighter jets? There is no, this is just a very short-sighted operation. And if they choose to go forward, they could chicken out and do like symbolic strikes again. But the reality is if the U.S. does anything at this point, Iran's just going to retaliate in full. So what's the end game? The end game, if I'm forced to speculate, because I'm really struggling on the reasoning behind this, I think it's probably the Strait of Hormuz and the potential leverage over Chinese oil is a big part of it. But also the spectacle aspect of it has to be considered, that the Epstein files has pretty much destroyed the legitimacy of the United States government. The president of the United States is cited by direct FBI evidence in crimes that are horrific. It's very hard to do that as well. So when you have Witkoff and Kushner discussing things with Iran and then going and talking with Russia, we'll have to see what Russia's actual actions are here, because it would be effectively a double cross in this case. You could go even deeper and say, well, maybe Russia, who controls the United States, which there's an argument for that at this point, that the United States is operating as a puppet, at least with limited control and influence through Witkoff and Kushner at the minimum. You could say that this is Russia trying to destroy the United States. I mean, maybe. I don't really know. I don't have the answers. But there's a lot of things going on here. So what we really want to try and focus on is the who, what, when, where, why, how. The Q6 model, right? It's using these questions to establish all the context available. So with all of that said, let's go ahead and we will go into actual reporting. I'll give you guys the headlines and everything and the information thus far. So Oman and U.S. officials have confirmed that the next round of U.S.-Iran talks will take place tomorrow on Thursday in Geneva. They're moving past a channel that began as indirect discussions in Muscat into a direct time compressed negotiation. A PBS timeline has shown us how quickly the file has escalated. Indirect talks in Oman on February 6th, a first Geneva round on February 17th, and now a follow-up session. U.S. naval and air assets are still being concentrated around Iran, and ISW and critical threats are reporting actually that yesterday IRGC ground forces held an exercise at the Medina ul Munawara operational base near Bandar Abbas on the Persian Gulf Islands. Explicit preparations for potential clash near the this is a specific preparation for a clash near the Strait of Hormuz. So you got Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Oman, Egypt, and the UAE. They are really lobbying a lot here against the, oh my goodness. Holy smokes. All right, sorry, my camera is being weird. They're really arguing a lot here against U.S. action. They've got diplomats that even the UAE has signaled that it's not going to open its airspace for attacks by the U.S. and Iran. That is something that is really carried in sentiment across the region in a big way. The internally in Iran, it's still unstable. They've been experiencing protests. There was protests yesterday, the third day in a row of students protesting across Iran. It is beyond argument at this point that the United States that Iran has killed tens of thousands of protesters. It's pretty much been verified that on the day of from the 8th and the 9th of January, over those 2 days, 30,000 people were killed. So these are really big numbers. But it just goes to show that, they don't really care how they stay in power. And they're still clearly confident enough that they are able to. We should assume that Iran can deal with the protests unless something changes. I think that's the fundamental idea here, is we should assume that Iran is capable of suppressing protests and maintaining control until we see them lose control. To operate on the assumption that they will lose control, I think, is the wrong move here, because I think it's very possible that this oppressive regime that's been coordinating with China to build a surveillance state, that's been coordinating with Russia, that is really a ingrained autocracy here, that they're just suddenly going to lose to the masses. That's really just not how the world works. It's unfortunate. It sucks. I wish it was easier. I wish that was, how things happen, but it's not. It's not. And I don't think that we should be treating it any other way. So, February 6th, let me give you kind of a quick timeline here. February 6th, indirect U.S.-Iran nuclear talks convene under Omani mediation, with the head of U.S. Central Command participating on February 17th. We saw our Geneva talks begin. And then Iranian forces very briefly closed the Strait of Hormuz to demonstrate that they could do that. The Oman and Iranian officials in Geneva, they're framing this conversation now as a chance to avoid escalation. We have the next round of talks tomorrow, from the 20th to the 23rd. There was dozens of anti-regime protests going on across Iran. And as of yesterday, we did see those ground forces conducting operations within the Persian Islands. And, it goes to show, like, Iran actually, if you look at it, has a pretty crazy network of bases and installations built around the Middle East. The United States is like sailing itself into a kill box. I'm really not kidding. I mean, it's from a strategic perspective, it just is kind of mind boggling to me, um, because there's just no. Uh, I just think the math doesn't work out. So it's really, from an analytical perspective, from an observational perspective, this could be a potential moment where we see the perception of American military might uh, collapse, and it could be, wow. So, um, and everybody who's now joining us, thank you guys for popping in. If you haven't hit the like button, hit the like button, hit the heart, tap it a couple times. And if you're watching the recording, why haven't you liked this yet? You've been watching for 20 minutes. What are you doing? So, my friends, that's what I think is going around Iran. We really need to. The last thing I will say about this, and then we're going to move on, and it's going to come back up, of course, because we're talking about the Middle East regionally. But the thing I really think is this deadline. I think is arbitrary to some degree. I think that they're playing for time. Am I confident enough to make a poly market bet? Probably not. But I do think the U.S. is going to attack. The only question is, do they try and kind of like play it off like, we just decided to do limited strikes, right? In which case the conversation might be to Iran in that background. Can we like blow up a couple places and like leave so we don't have to fight because we don't, want to get absolutely thrashed? Um, and maybe that's a discussion. But I think that Trump at least really wants to. I don't think he makes all of the decisions in the United States. I don't think he does that at all. I think there's a tremendous amount of influence, particularly from billionaires and tech lobbyists like Peter Thiel in Palantir. And there's a lot of influence from Israel as well, and Israeli interests. Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff have deep ties to Israel. Look at the Gaza Great Trust Project. There's really no question that there's a lot of competing interests who might want this. But this is also really causing a fissure in terms of wider global relations over this issue because, if you're watching our Africa Spotlight, if you've seen that, you understand just how tenuous the situation in the region of the Sahel is and how deeply involved and how much the proxy war between the UAE and Saudi Arabia, which has widened into a regional conflict between the parties, particularly the RSF, Rapid Support Forces in Sudan, responsible for a horrific genocide in the city of Al Fashir, where we saw probably somewhere close to, it's very possible, 100,000 people were butchered in a matter of days. Really one of the most horrific things I think I've ever reported on in my lifetime. I am proud to say that I was reporting it before international news was. So, it's one of the things I will say of value if you want to come and get your news here is that I'm traditionally, and this is a pattern, I can verify this, I'm traditionally 1 to 2 days ahead on a lot of these things. So you'll be able to see these things coming because just the way I perform analysis is highly predictive. So when you're looking at all of these things from a pattern-based analytical perspective, there's actually a lot of keys and cues and things like that on how we can talk about and predict these things. So it's one of the advantages of coming here as well is just that we're able to kind of get ahead of things because analysis is the silver bullet when it comes to autocracy and information suppression. So we definitely are committed to doing that, and that is the next and the phase that we're entering here at the Firebrand Project is seeing that need to give citizens the same level of information that the reporters and the journalists are getting. Um, One, because a lot of people want to be citizen journalists, and I believe that citizen journalists should have a place to go to get data that they trust. And that's why I want to do the work for you, citizen journalists and citizens, because as citizens of the global world, I believe that there is a fundamental human right to access to verifiable information. You also are entitled the truth with all the context, and anyone who tells you that they can't provide that, um, I don't believe that that's an excuse. I think that with analysis and proper sourcing, you can provide a full scope on things because we live in 2026. The internet exists and everything is documented and open source. So keep that in mind when you're watching your news. Is Are they saying, "Oh, I can't tell you, I can't share my source, I can't do this"? Well, I am here to tell you that the source doesn't matter because the process of analysis allows us to predict what those internal people are going to say. We judge them by their actions, not by their words, not by their internal sources. Critical thinking is the silver bullet against authoritarianism. I just want to give you guys the place to come and get that information. So, uh, in terms of the Middle East, we need to take a minute to talk about Palestine and Gaza because one of the other things that I have been covering exhaustively has been the situation in Gaza, the humanitarian crisis that is absolutely a genocide being perpetrated by the United States and the Israeli government against the people of Palestine to allow for the the building of a new techno feudal city by the oligarchs, the billionaires, and the parties involved with the Board of Peace, as well as primarily American interests in the region. So uh, that is that is absolutely verifiable. Like there's zero question about that. Right. There's no debate that that's what's happening. There's plenty of information and data to be found on the Great Trust plan in Gaza. There's plenty of information to be found. But in Gaza, you know, in my experience, I've noticed that the term ceasefire has become very convenient in the geopolitical space right now, and I mean that on a more diplomatic level because ceasefire itself is almost like a filing, the ability to file away a conflict even if it's not resolved, if the global community can say there's a ceasefire, and that's what's been done in Gaza and Palestine, the West Bank, is that the term ceasefire has been weaponized by these countries that are perpetrating and actively engaging in armed conflict and the persistent attack and murder of women and children, civilians. Over 50% of the people that have been killed in Gaza have been women or children, not men. So over 50%, and these groups do not have female militants. Hamas is not running around giving AKs to women and children. So it means that over 50% of these people were just the wrong person. This is because of this style of indiscriminate airstrikes. You have reports of the United States using thermobaric weaponry or hypothermobaric weaponry, which essentially incinerates individuals that are in the blast radius. They effectively disappear. And this is considered to be it's prohibited, these weapons. The only other example I have of them being used recently has been in Russia with their use of the multi-rocket launch systems that use that weapon. So this is what's happening in Gaza. And so, of course, the ceasefire is going on, and I want to make sure that you know I tell you what's really happening in Gaza, because it's really important that we debunk the ceasefire narrative, particularly with the Board of Peace now established and trying to move forward in Gaza. So the latest updates I have from Relief Web, which tracks humanitarian projects, particularly the UN and other NGOs. They have been able to document the continuation of airstrikes, shelling, and gunfire across the Strip from February 11th to the 19th. They've verified this has caused additional civilian casualties. Despite the ceasefire that's been in place since October, you have 20 Palestinians killed and 52 injured within this period of time, that being the 11th to the 19th. And since the ceasefire began, quote unquote, you've seen 611 dead and 1,630 wounded. The last time I looked at that number, it was somewhere in the 400s. And I don't, and I wasn't, it hasn't been all that long since I've checked in on this. The Middle East Eye is reporting that Israel has continued to violate the ceasefire, and they've had at least 7 airstrikes in Rafah and east of Gaza City in a single Sunday. In one Sunday, a sick infant was denied exit for treatment abroad by Israeli forces and died recently. A 27-year-old woman was shot north of the enclave. Multiple sources are reporting that those living along the yellow line are enduring nightly gunfire and shelling, and even saying that there is in fact no ceasefire. I recently reported on the story of 2 young boys whose mothers sent them out to grab firewood, and they were both killed by Israeli strikes. Both young, under the age of 10 at least. A horrific story, hearing the mother's account, but this happens every day in Gaza. This is a ongoing genocide, and with data like what we're seeing, with over 50% of those casualties, well over 70,000. I think we're past 75,000 at least. And we have to consider those people under the rubble. You can't even verify their bodies. So, on that basis alone, we could probably safely say that that number can increase by a factor of 10%. But I bet you it's much higher. You know, the Israel in particular has been tightening down its control over various types of border crossings. So they're stopping aid. You have on the 11th to the 18th, WHO, the World Health Organization, it did coordinate multiple evacuation missions, and it moved 100 patients to Egypt and Jordan, but hundreds are still stuck and in need. We've got more airstrikes, and the situation just is not changing. There's also reports that the Israel is now blocking multiple different aid organizations in stopping their ability to enter Gaza, stopping the flow of aid. And about a third of, generally speaking, only a third of what is delivered by aid programs makes its way into the city. This is a intentionally crafted famine that has been built and is part of a larger plan. Another part of this discussion is the relationship between Somaliland and Israel. And there is allegations, ones that I tend to think, just based on the pattern and the actions of Israel, are credible, in that they are treating with Somaliland to displace or move displaced Gazans to Somaliland. And we saw that they signed a deal with Somaliland. They actually were the first UN recognized nation to recognize the breakaway state of Somaliland, which was really a big deal, and they're in talks about building military installations. So, I think that you can't not. I'm not saying it is, but I'm saying you can't not consider that Israel could be building extermination camps in Somalia uh, to get rid of these people. And that is where I think it's important as a community and as journalists, as open source journalists, that with transparency, that we report on the fact that um, all of the signs point toward intentional and well executed genocide of these people. Steps are being put in place. Um, so, Somaliland is not a country, and if the United States were to recognize Somaliland, it would worsen a souring relationship between those regional capitals in the Middle East. Those powers that are Turkey, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, even the UAE, which I would say is probably at this point the closest aligned with Israel. Israel has allowed the UAE to use their airfields to to the fly supplies to RSF bases. They've used it to get around airspace restrictions and things like that to supply their proxy forces. So, but even the UAE doesn't want Iran, a war in Iran, a refugee crisis that would be triggered, a headless regime, a collapsing Iran with zero structure at this point in time, when you have this new Islamic NATO that people are starting to call that, where you have these Islamic countries coming together and forming defense pacts. That's verified. You have defense pacts between Turkey, between Egypt and Saudi Arabia, between Pakistan and Saudi Arabia. They're building a regional coalition, and this is in response to the escalating situation with the UAE and Israel, as these pariah states act as destabilizing forces in the wider region to basically see what they can grab. Israel's cabinet actually approved the sale of seized territory in Palestine to Israeli nationals. That is blatant annexation. You cannot sell something that is not yours. Of course, this would be a very important step in establishing the grounds to start building Gaza Riviera, which, if you really want to understand what they're talking about, look up Jared Kushner's pitch at the World Economic Forum, where he is trying to get investors to invest in Gaza Riviera. It's pretty disturbing. So these regional states, what is this pushback really look like? The general idea is that Turkey was originally trying to host the talks themselves. Those talks were ultimately done elsewhere. Turkey has been very vocal that they do not want the U.S. to do this. Turkey shares a border with Iran. They have struggled with refugee crises in the past. And, they are all really affirming here that they do not want, that they're encouraging the United States to not engage with Iran. Part of this discussion, I'm sure, is the United States trying to convince everyone, like, it won't go poorly. We're going to win. It's going to be fine. Now, the thing is, a lot of these countries too, ironically, have done and invested heavily in the United States, like throughout 2025. Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Turkey is a huge part of the shadow network that has been built by the billionaires, and it goes all the way back, and you can track the Epstein relationships into Turkey. Turkey's a big part of whatever the nexus was. It's a big part of the billionaire real estate kind of bubble in terms of their shadow market that they have created. Turkey's a linchpin It's bordering Syria. There's lots of work going on in Syria. You have Tom Barrack, who is a very, very bad man. I've even personally, through my own investigation, verified that he has had secret meetings, many of them with Jeffrey Epstein. I've gone through the files myself. He is verified to have been in a meeting with Jeffrey Epstein, with Saudi officials, with the former president or former prime minister of Israel, Ehud Barak, and Epstein himself. Even Larry Summers was invited to this meeting. He's always been in and around Turkey, colony capital, his company, deeply involved. There's a very deep relationship in terms of the United States billionaire class that is currently operating as the government of the United States, which also, I guess, happens to be a international pedophile ring, which is just really shameful. The Epstein files, it's undeniable. I mean, the world too, I think, has had to accept that when you are entering any kind of diplomatic relationship with the United States at this point, you have to make sure that you can justify to your country why you are negotiating with child traffickers, right? Like, why is my government? It's like, why do you negotiate with terrorists? Well, you don't. Well, the question then becomes, on an international level, do we negotiate with, pedophiles and criminals and people who seek to undermine democracy in the global world order? Do we treat with them and make deals with them? And of course, as a pro-democracy, pro-integrity, information outlet, I would assert that yes, absolutely, you should not engage in diplomatic relationships with those people. But there's criminals who are heads of state everywhere, and that doesn't really stop that. So that's an unfortunate reality, and it's one of those things where, as a global citizenship, as the global democracy that I think needs to exist, the social contract between all people of Earth on how we should be treated. There's a lot of room for that kind of relationship where you're just not sure. So regardless of this whole situation, particularly this block, it's almost like you have two worlds fighting, and they're going to have to choose. Do they choose their regional security, their own regional power base, where they can directly control, right? Turkey, its military is built not necessarily to attack, but its military is built specifically to operate within the Middle East, to operate in that region, to control that region. Saudi Arabia, they are actively fighting this proxy war, and with the help of Egypt and Turkey. The United States itself, taking these actions, is like your friend who you went in with. Let me give you an analogy. It's like you and your buddy go in together on a house, right? Because that's what this is. These are all real estate deals. The whole global, kinetic mercantilism, right, is the U.S. model. It's using force to extract trade results or business deals. When you look at something like the situation in Iran, you have the United States and Saudi Arabia and Turkey and Qatar who are putting up money in the United States. Like Abu Dhabi is the group that funded the deal that was the counteroffer to the sale of Discovery, Paramount Discovery. No, I'm forgetting the Discovery deal, where actually now the board has come out and said that they are going to reconsider. If they had already said they were going to sell to Netflix, and now they're saying they're going to reconsider selling to Paramount's Skydance, which is owned by the Ellisons, which is directly linked to the Trump government and has been a longtime supporter of Trump, which would signal media capture of further consolidation and capture of the American media space. So we just found out that the board actually announced, this was yesterday, that they would be reconsidering. And part of this is because the Paramount Skydance has made pretty clear that they're going to use the FCC to basically stop the deal, and so they're basically probably offered them a ton of cash. That cash most certainly came out of the UAE. So in that case, you've got this weird crossover. You have them financially entangled in this US, um, the capture of the US institutional systems through capital, right? Where they're deploying billions of dollars into the United States in this quid pro quo relationship. It was made possible for Saudi Arabia to purchase a controlling stake of 93.7 something percent in Electronic Arts, a major US gaming company, which should be illegal. And there's laws to stop direct ownership of something like this by a foreign government. However, Jared Kushner and his use of his company, Affinity Partners, very reminiscent of the Epstein laundering model, has been able to funnel billions of dollars from the UAE, from Saudi Arabia, from Qatar into these different American institutions, right? So the reason I'm talking about this relationship is because they're so deeply financially, criminally entangled in the deconstruction and basically centralization of U.S. media, U.S. tech, and has pledged tons of money. But something is changing in that relationship, and that is something that you really can't deny. The one thing I would like to point to really illustrate this is Saudi Arabia's decision to actually go forward and invest not in United States manufactured F-35s, but in the Turkish Khan fifth generation fighter project. That is something that the United States doesn't like. Why? Because the United States makes tons of money on being the world's arms dealer, except the United States is a arms dealer that can't make any arms. And beyond that, the choice to move billions of dollars into a Turkish weapon system and to invest in a regional ally signals that they're maybe willing to move away from the United States. So it'll be interesting to see if that leverage, right? Because the leverage they have, the leverage that they're talking about, not the geopolitical leverage, but the leverage in the room where they're actually talking, is probably somewhere along the lines of, we'll pull this money if you do this, or like, are you sure you want to do this, or what's going on with this investment? Should we pause this deal if you strike Iran, right? So it's significant, the departure on this level. I mean, it's measurable. These are things that would really and have upset the United States. But it seems that, and from a perspective of a observer and just an analyst who's looking at from a perspective of perceived stability, if your region itself where you project power is unstable, you're not able to operate effectively on a geopolitical stage. If there's one thing I'm certain of, is that Saudi Arabia wants to own the world. Mohammed bin Salman wants to own everything. He's a psychopath and a narcissist and a horrifically bad man. So if he can't do that because he's busy dealing with the UAE, and if he can't do that because the United States, basically bombs Iran, creates a humanitarian crisis, creates a refugee crisis, creates a civil war in the country, then it's going to be hard to focus on your power and your greater aspirations. So remember that in geopolitics, particularly the transactional relationships that the United States enjoys in its current capacity, and honestly, it appears like historically it's always been transactional relationships here. Uh, those relationships might not be worth um, as much if, like, they might not be worth the U.S. bombing Iran. That's something we have to consider. Kushner is absolutely deeply involved with the Saudis. He's backed the Saudis. He has defended MBS when Jamal Khashoggi was brutally tortured and killed in an embassy in Turkey, where MBS was watching live. And Khashoggi was known for reporting on the corruption within Saudi Arabia at the time that MBS was consolidating power. Kushner has a very good relationship with MBS. They literally text like buddies. They call one another. It's Kushner really adores or looks up to. But he's literally stolen documents off the president's desk to aid MBS in his ability to beat his rivals and ascend to the throne and eventually to be king, which is his ultimate aspiration, as the king of Saudi Arabia is getting quite old. Um, so, that's like a really big consideration. So the real thing for me, that I want to watch in all of this is what is going on with that relationship, because the biggest leverage over the United States that they hold is the relationship in terms of back end shadow capital. It's like they own all of this crypto, billions in crypto that they've purchased. They've got a ton of leverage over the United States because the United States and its interests are now reflective of the investment portfolios of the billionaires who are in charge. The United States doesn't worry about its national interest. It's worrying about its personal interests because the United States operates on the behalf of a small subset of billionaires who run the country. And that is where we have to really be looking at this from a perspective of what do these actions mean? What do these actions mean in terms of that relationship? And there's something in my gut, and this is my gut. I mean, I don't have the all the answers, but my gut says they want to do it more than they care about the relationships. Um, and the motivation that makes sense for me would be to get leverage over China with the Strait of Hormuz, but it could also be an ego thing. It could be both. It's really hard to tell, and that's what makes this all so messy. And then you add the element on top of the United States not actually being able to secure a clean victory in all of this, makes it even messier, because. And the other question is, if the United States sees 2 aircraft carriers blown up in the ocean, and I will note that Iran is also being reported on. Iran's reporting that they're in the process of a deal with anti-ship missiles in China. Is just another sign that they are preparing themselves. And I think they take the chance. I think they take the chance. I think that if the US does it, I think that they go for it, because what do they have to lose? Especially internally, they don't know how strong they are. So a conflict with the US could actually be to their advantage in terms of internal stability. And I think they have, math says, and I keep saying this because I think it's crazy, it's delusional. Iran has more missiles than we have missile interceptors. So they've moved so many of our Patriot batteries. They've stripped and weakened the defense of other US bases and installations around the world, including those that protect Taiwan, to move them all to the Middle East. I think originally the intent was like, oh, because everyone was like, dude, they'll bomb us. So the US says, don't worry, we'll bring all of our air defenses. But now it's also taking longer because they need to strip the armor, the munitions, the ammo caches, the all of the different materials from around the world, and they need to bring them all to the Middle East. And the airlifter traffic basically says that's exactly what's happening. Is that they're still bringing resources in. Their strategy is going to try and be basically overwhelming force. It's not too different from what Putin thought he was going to do when he said he was going to take Ukraine in 3 days. I think they severely are underestimating the capacity of Iran, particularly their Shahed fleet, and what those Shaheds are capable of. Because if they looked at what's happening in Ukraine, they have a direct analog of what that looks like. And that's that Patriot batteries don't work, that something is always going to get through. And if you pair those strikes with missiles, it ends badly. And if you need proof of concept, you can ask Ukraine's energy infrastructure and the thousands of civilians who have been killed in those strikes in Ukraine. The argument that, oh, well, they didn't have enough Patriot batteries. Patriot batteries are about to be useless because there will be no interceptors. The United States tried to place a contract with Lockheed Martin, some of the other producers, for their even more advanced missile interception system for THAAD interceptors. And they straight up said that those won't even be available until 2027. Whatever they use now, there's no certainty that those stockpiles will even be replenished. So when I say this, I'm trying to communicate just how much this weakens the United States. I mean, I'm not going to rule out the USS Gerald R. Ford sinking to the bottom of the sea. In fact, if I was Iran, I would launch everything at the USS Gerald R. Ford because it's symbolic. It's a warship. It's the newest, most advanced warship the United States has ever built. And the fact that they are steaming it towards the Middle East is insane to me. I'm sure that the Iranian, regime is just scheming. So we really don't know, but like the chat says here, Ukraine has demonstrated that drone warfare is, it's the new standard, and that you don't need to have more to win. You just need to have, you just need to be slippery, and you need to have more drones. So the United States doesn't even have the military industrial capacity to build the missiles. There's been a lot of, I'll add this because I'm trying to give you the full picture. If you look really hard at the United States, they've been passing a lot of laws, and they started something called Project Vault. They are. I just heard this. The USS Gerald R. Ford is currently docked in Greece because its plumbing is kaput. Yeah. Well, if you want to know it's something that's really ridiculous about the strength of the U.S. Navy, look up littoral combat boats and look up that program. If you look really hard at the U.S. Navy, it breaks all the time. The destroyer, the Arleigh Burke class destroyer fleet is aging. It's from the 80s. I mean, they've modernized, but the U.S. can't replace these vessels. They cannot replace these vessels. The military industrial complex of the United States is a corpse at best. So when we look at all these things, when we look at the pressure on the United States in terms of their inability to get rare earth minerals, the things they need to manufacture weapons by design, thanks to China's economic policies that they've been using, and effectively a shadow battle over the economy, one the United States is decisively losing to the point where they're actually having to talk about it and put billions of dollars into stockpiles cooperatively with these private companies who can't get a hold of these resources. This is, this is where we're at. And the United States, I have to emphasize this, the United States is desperate and weak. And it has one bullet in its gun here. And if it uses it on Iran, and Iran responds the way that I think they're capable of responding, then it's going to be really something to behold. In terms of geopolitics, I think it's going to be historic in its scale, in the magnitude, and in the um, level of repercussions it has for the perception of American strength, the world order, and all that stuff. So we're not doomed. It's not all over. I don't think we can look at it that way. I think geopolitics is overwhelming for sure, but it also gives us an opportunity to understand the wider world and focus on connecting with the wider world, which I think has never been more important. I think that the need for a global democracy, a connected society of people all over the world, um, is something we need. We need to understand each other. We need to know what each other's challenges and what we're facing. And I believe that if everybody works together, if we decide that we are a global community, that we, the people of Earth, deserve a future, and that we can't let these billionaires take us any farther down this path, whether it be the destruction of our planet and the extinction of our species due to their use of oil and gas in the face of science and information saying that we're already past the tipping points that will cause really horrible things like famine and the loss of habitable areas in the Middle East. Billions of people will die if we allow these people to continue. And that's just a fact. That's just a data. That's what we need to be talking about. So it all starts with being and promoting democracy and the choice of the people over the few, because we all want to live. We all want a future. I want to have kids. And I have to say, I have to believe that if we keep talking about things, if we keep fighting, and if we don't let, especially, and this is where I have to say, this is why I'm doing what I'm doing at the Firebrand Project, is we need integrity and transparency in reporting. The news has become the delivery of whatever narrative you want. It's curated, it's delivered to engage you, not to inform you. And what I really want to hammer home is if you go to a article, a news source, a creator, and you do not leave with the 6 Qs, all right, the core 6 Qs, the 6 questions, you don't leave with an understanding of the who, what, when, where, and why, and how, then that person is not providing you with the information that is available. Because I firmly believe that full transparent reporting is giving you the whole picture, not what the outlet that's reporting on the other thing said that they're quoting. And we need to basically cut the gap between high quality open source intelligence and reporting and the citizen, because we have citizen journalists all over the world. This is an era of citizen journalism, and I want you guys to be able to come somewhere and know that you're getting data and facts. And I've had it with all these folks on here with the all their exceptionalism and my I can save you, I can do this, I have the inside scoop. And next time someone tells me they have an inside scoop and they can't provide me with data, or they're unwilling to give me that who and that what and that when, news is not a personality, it's information. And if you're not getting information, then they're not reporting. And the other big thing about reporting is all about scope. So when you're looking at your creators, are you leaving more informed? If you're not, you need to come here more, because I will make sure that you leave informed. I provide all of the sources in every video that I'm referencing. Straight up source list, easy, click and go. It's all there. The world is open source. No one has an edge. So it doesn't work that way. You don't get to have an inside scoop because I'm a 25-year-old guy who's working out of an office in my house, who has been able to predict through analysis the collapse of the global world order. I've been able to do that from my desk. I have no college degree. I have I have no experience in politics or journalism. I literally just use Socratic questioning and cross analysis, and I have been able to predict things that insiders like Lev Parnas or Michael Cohen have come out and said they had to get the inside scoop on happening. I don't believe that. I believe that with analysis, it's possible. So unless they're giving you the full picture, which to be honest, I talked to Lev Parnas a couple times. I know Michael Cohen's in the Epstein files. I know he's associated. I don't, I don't read a ton of Lev's stuff. We cover Ukraine as together, but I think that, I don't see, I haven't seen all that stuff, but a lot of people like him. So, if you like him, you like him. I've worked with him a couple times, so all that said, it doesn't matter who, what, you just need to be getting the information. And that's what I want to leave you with today. But most importantly, as we close things out, I want to remind you that my job is to bring you the information. My job is to bring you these facts. My job is to get you this reporting. It's your job to decide what you're going to do with it. If any of these things spoke to you today, I encourage you to go into the comments section of this newsletter and find these stories. Report on this in your own way, because the Firebrand Project, moving forward, the commitment to you from me is I will get you the information you need to get and give quality reporting. That reporting doesn't need to be on a Substack. That reporting can be from your mouth to your friends' ears. Hey, did you hear this? They say, well, I don't know about that. Well, actually, I have receipts, because where I go to get my news, they provide those for me every time. And that's my commitment to you. That's my commitment from the Firebrand Project. And if you want to support the Firebrand Project, then please become a subscriber. If you're not already subscribed, do it. It's really easy. You'll get invitations, notifications for live streams. You'll get this sent straight to your inbox. And, this is something that I'm very passionate about. So I want you to know that I'm not going to compromise on transparency ever. If you want to help this work, times are tough. Become a paid subscriber if you can. It's $6 a month here on Substack, and it really helps me in my continuation of this work and just being able to afford life at the moment in the United States, where it's pretty tough at the moment. So, those subscriptions really help. If you want to go and offer additional support, you can scan the QR code. It'll take you to my link tree where you can find me on all the other different social media platforms, as well as you can go to the Buy Me a Coffee and make one-time donations there as well. So if you can help me out on that front, that'd be really great. Anything helps, guys. So with all of that said, that's today's report. And I'm going to be posting some smaller updates on TikTok later today. There'll be a couple things coming out on Blue Sky, X, and Threads, and as well. So, and go subscribe on YouTube. That is really the important part, is getting us on all of these other platforms so we can interact with more people. So I would love for you guys to come and join us on TikTok and YouTube for sure. So with all that said, my friends, remember, you are the journalists. This is the same information that those people who are reporting the news, those people who are on the ground, I'm giving you that information so you can make that critical analysis and you can be the independent journalism in your life just by informing people about these things. And, it's really a pleasure and an honor to be able to do this and continue to work. And I'm grateful to each and every one of you for being part of the Firebrand Project. And beyond that, I'm grateful to my partner, and my family, for their support, in doing what I believe is right, even though it causes financial hardship and things like that, because I am committed to transparency and reporting, integrity and reporting, and getting you guys the facts. So thank you. And I will make sure to see you guys tomorrow. We're going to be doing the Asia Indo-Pacific spotlight tomorrow. So you're going to want to make sure that you got you tune in for that as well, because of course there's always something going around China and Taiwan. Japan's quite interesting at the moment. The Philippines is quite unstable. Uh, so yeah. Oh, and we'll have to talk about Myanmar as well. Thailand, Cambodia, we'll check in there. So lots to cover. Thank you, everyone. I appreciate you. Make sure you like, subscribe, restack, go to the link tree, all that good stuff. And I will see you tomorrow. So burn bright, resist.